Oke-Ara was a busy village nestled among lush forests, rolling hills, and sparkling rivers. The people lived simple lives farming, trading, and hunting. Every morning, the market square came alive with the sounds of traders shouting, children laughing, and women haggling over the prices of yams, peppers, and cloth. Life in Oke-Ara was predictable, but one day, everything changed. A man called Baba Irati arrived in the village with his daughter, Ifeoluwa. They came in a wooden cart pulled by an old donkey, their belongings packed neatly in baskets. Baba Irati was tall and thin, with a calm but distant look in his eyes. His daughter, Ifeoluwa, was stunning. Her skin glowed like the morning sun, and her eyes sparkled like stars. She walked with quiet grace, her head always held high. The villagers were curious. Baba Irati claimed to be a traveling merchant, selling rare fabrics, beads, and charms. He quickly set up a stall in the market square, and people flocked to see his goods. His fabrics were vibrant, his beads sparkled in the sunlight, and his charms seemed to hold secrets no one could guess. Soon, he became a respected figure in Oke-Ara. But Ifeoluwa was a mystery. She rarely spoke, except to her father. She didn't laugh with the other girls or join the women fetching water at the stream. Instead, she spent her days helping Baba Irati at the stall, or wandering alone by the river. The villagers began to whisper. "Why is she so quiet?" one woman asked. "She's too beautiful to be normal," another said. "Maybe she's hiding something," a hunter murmured. Ifeoluwa's silence only made her more intriguing. Many young men in the village tried to speak to her. They brought her gifts, necklaces carved from wood, ripe mangoes, and even fresh fish from the river. But Ifeoluwa always smiled politely and walked away. She seemed untouchable, like a star far beyond their reach. The village elder Baba Sola watched her with suspicion. "No one comes to Oke-Ara without a reason," he said one evening, stroking his long white beard. "And no one is that perfect without a flaw." His words made the villagers even more curious. One day, a bold farmer named Akin approached Baba Irati at his stall. "Your daughter is beautiful," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Why doesn't she marry? Many men would gladly take her as their wife." Baba Irati smiled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ifeoluwa will marry when the gods decide," he said. Not the answer only deepened the mystery. Why was Ifeoluwa so distant? Why did Baba Irati speak of the gods? The villagers couldn't stop talking about them. Little did they know, their questions would soon be answered in ways they could never imagine. As the months passed, Ifeoluwa's beauty and mystery spread beyond Oke-Ara. Her elegance was the talk of nearby villages, and soon, suitors began to arrive. Farmers, hunters, and even wealthy traders came, hoping to win her hand. Each man brought gifts: yam tubers, sacks of rice, carved wooden stools, and colorful fabrics. Some even brought cattle, thinking such wealth would surely impress Baba Irati. But every man who asked was turned away. "She is not ready to marry," Baba Irati would say, his voice firm. "Only the gods can decide when and to whom she will be given." At first, the suitors left with respect, believing Baba Irati's words. But as more were rejected, whispers began to spread. "He is hiding something," one rejected suitor grumbled. "No man keeps a daughter like that unmarried without reason," said another. What kind of father refuses the wealth of kings for his child? Even the villagers of Oke-Ara started to grow uneasy. The women speculated as they pounded yam in their clay mortars. "Perhaps she has a sickness we cannot see," one woman said. "Or maybe she is cursed," another whispered, glancing over her shoulder. Meanwhile, Ifeoluwa remained quiet. She helped her father at the stall and avoided conversations about marriage. Whenever the topic came up, she would smile faintly and change the subject. To the villagers, her silence only deepened the mystery. One day, a young hunter named Ekundayo arrived in Oke-Ara. He was known as a brave and kind man from a neighboring village. Tall and strong, he walked with the confidence of someone who had faced wild animals and survived. Ekundayo had heard of Ifeoluwa's beauty and her father's refusals, but he decided to try his luck. He approached Baba Irati in the market square, bowing respectfully. "I have heard of your daughter, and I wish to ask for her hand," he said. Baba Irati studied Ekundayo carefully. His expression softened slightly, but he still shook his head. "You are brave, young hunter, but Ifeoluwa will marry only when the gods permit it." Ekundayo did not leave like the others. "What must I do to gain the gods' permission?" he asked. The villagers gathered, curious about Baba Ireti's response. Baba Ireti thought for a long moment. Then he spoke. "If you truly wish to marry Ifeoluwa, you must prove yourself worthy. Bring me the golden feather of the Olododo bird from the hills of Igbo-Oro." The crowd gasped. Everyone knew the hills of Igbo-Oro were cursed. Spirits were said to haunt them, and no one who ventured there returned alive. The Olododo bird, with its shimmering golden feathers, was a legend. To ask for its feather was to send a man to his death, but Ekundayo smiled. "If that is what it takes, I will bring you the feather." The villagers shook their heads in disbelief. "He is brave, but foolish," they said. Ifeoluwa, standing quietly nearby, looked at Ekundayo with wide eyes. For the first time, her expression held something other than calm worry. Ekundayo left the village early the next morning, his bow slung over his shoulder and a small bag of provisions in hand. The villagers gathered at the edge of Oke-Ara to see him off. Some wished him luck, while others whispered their doubts. "He won't return," an old woman muttered. "No one survives the cursed hills." Baba Ireti stood silently, his face unreadable. Ifeoluwa lingered behind the crowd, her hands clasped tightly. She watched Ekundayo disappear into the dense forest path leading to Igbo-Oro. Her lips moved in a silent prayer. The journey to the hills was treacherous. Thick vines and twisted roots made every step a challenge. Strange sounds echoed through the forest, low growls, distant cries, and whispers carried by the wind. Ekundayo gripped his bow tightly, his heart pounding. But he pressed on, determined to prove his worth. As he climbed higher, the air grew colder, and the trees thinned out. The hills of Igbo-Oro loomed ahead, shrouded in mist. Ekundayo paused to catch his breath and eat a small piece of roasted yam from his bag. The quiet was unsettling. Even the birds seemed to avoid this place. At dusk, he reached the base of the hills. The ground was covered in a strange shimmering dust, and the air smelled faintly of something metallic. Ekundayo felt a chill run down his spine. He set up a small camp and lit a fire, hoping it would keep away any spirits or wild animals. As the fire crackled, Ekundayo noticed a figure watching him from the shadows. It was an old woman, her back hunched and her face hidden by a tattered cloth. "What brings you to Igbo-Oro, young hunter?" she asked, her voice raspy. "I seek the golden feather of the Olodo bird," Ekundayo replied, trying to hide his fear. The old woman cackled. "The Olododo bird? Foolish boy, many have sought it, but none have returned." Ekundayo stood tall. "I must try." The woman stared at him for a long moment before nodding. "Very well. Follow the trail of silver leaves at dawn, but beware the bird guards its feather fiercely. You must act with courage and cunning." Before Ekundayo could thank her, the woman vanished into the mist. He sat by his fire, thinking about her warning. His mind wandered to Ifeoluwa. Her quiet strength and beauty filled his thoughts, giving him resolve. He would not fail her. As dawn broke, Ekundayo found the trail of silver leaves the old woman had mentioned. He followed it cautiously, his senses sharp. The path led to a clearing where a massive tree stood, its branches glowing faintly in the morning light. Perched on one of the branches was the Olododo bird, its golden feathers gleaming like the sun. Ekundayo's breath caught. He nocked an arrow and aimed carefully. But as he pulled back the string, the bird turned its sharp, glowing eyes toward him and let out an ear-piercing screech. Ekundayo froze as the Olododo bird screeched again, its cry shaking the trees around him. The bird was larger than he had imagined, its golden feathers shimmering like fire in the morning light. Its sharp talons dug into the branch it perched on, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity. For a moment, fear gripped Ekundayo. but he steadied himself, reminding himself why he was here. Slowly, he released his arrow. It soared through the air with precision, aimed directly at the bird's chest. But just as it was about to hit, the bird flapped its massive wings, creating a gust of wind so strong that the arrow veered off course and embedded itself harmlessly in the tree trunk. The bird launched itself into the air, its wings beating like thunder. Ekundayo dove to the ground as the bird swooped toward him, its talons aiming for his head. He rolled to the side and scrambled to his feet, grabbing another arrow from his quiver. This time, he aimed for the bird's wing. The arrow hit its mark. The Olodo bird let out a furious cry as one of its wings faltered. It landed heavily on the ground, flapping and screeching in anger. Ekundayo saw his chance and rushed forward, his knife drawn. But as he approached, the bird snapped its beak at him, forcing him to jump back. The bird's eyes glowed brighter, and its cries seemed to echo with an otherworldly power. The ground beneath Ekundayo's feet trembled. He realized this was no ordinary creature, it was something connected to the spirits of the cursed hills. He would need more than strength to defeat it. He remembered the old woman's warning act with courage and cunning. Glancing around, he noticed the shimmering dust on the ground. He quickly grabbed a handful and flung it toward the bird's face. The dust sparkled in the air, and the bird shrieked as it blinded its glowing eyes. Using the distraction, Ekundayo lunged forward and grabbed one of the bird's golden feathers. It was warm to the touch, almost as if it were alive. The bird screeched again, thrashing wildly, but Ekundayo held tight to the feather and rolled away just as the bird lunged at him. With the feather in hand, he sprinted back toward the trail of silver leaves. The bird's cries echoed behind him, growing fainter as he ran. By the time he reached the edge of the hills, the forest was silent once more. He collapsed under a tree, clutching the feather tightly. His body ached, but he had succeeded. As he made his way back to Oke-Ara, Ekundayo couldn't shake the feeling that the bird's glowing eyes were watching him from the shadows. He clutched the feather tighter, hoping it was worth the danger. Ekundayo returned to Oke-Ara just as the sun was setting, its golden light washing over the village. The sight of him emerging from the forest, weary but alive, sent waves of astonishment through the people. The golden feather in his hand gleamed like molten fire, and whispers spread quickly he survived the cursed hills. The villagers gathered around him, cheering and asking questions. "Did you see spirits?" one boy asked, his eyes wide. "How did you get the feather?" another demanded. But Ekundayo said little, his exhaustion evident. He simply handed the feather to Baba Iridi, who examined it closely. The older man's expression shifted, a mixture of surprise and unease crossing his face. "You have proven yourself worthy," Baba Iridi said finally. "The gods have spoken." Preparations for the wedding began immediately. The women of the village gathered to weave aso oak for Ifeoluwa's attire, while the men prepared gifts and food. Drummers began practicing the rhythms that would fill the air on the wedding day. The excitement was palpable, but not everyone was pleased. Some elders whispered among themselves, "This is too dangerous." Baba Sola, the eldest among them, said, "The boy has disturbed forces he does not understand." Meanwhile, Ifeoluwa remained quiet, watching Ekundayo from a distance. She wanted to thank him but hesitated. She carried a burden too heavy for words. That evening, she approached him by the river where he had gone to wash. "You shouldn't have gone to Igbo Oro," she said softly, her voice trembling. Ekundayo turned to her, surprised. "I did it for you," he said, "to prove my love." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "There are things you don't know about me, things that might frighten you." He stepped closer, his expression serious. "I don't care what it is, Ifeoluwa. I will stand by you." Her heart ached at his words, but she said no more. The truth was too heavy, too dangerous. She could only hope that the coming days would not destroy the man she had begun to care for. The wedding preparations continued. As the day approached, the atmosphere in Oke-Ara grew tense. Strange things began to happen. The chickens in the village stopped laying eggs. Goats bleated in fear during the night, their cries echoing in the still air. A farmer reported seeing glowing eyes in the forest, watching him as he tilled his field. The elders gathered to consult the Ifa priest, who performed divinations. "There is a disturbance in the balance," he said, his voice grave. "The feather brought back from Ifeoluwa carries more than power, it carries a warning. Carries a warning." Despite these warnings, the wedding day arrived. Ekundayo stood proudly, dressed in his finest. Ifeoluwa looked radiant in her bridal attire, but her eyes were clouded with worry. As the drums thundered and the village celebrated, a strange wind blew through Oke-Ara, carrying with it the scent of something ancient and powerful. The wedding of Ekundayo and Ifeoluwa was the grandest Oke-Ara had ever seen. The villagers gathered in their finest clothes, their faces glowing with excitement. Drummers played energetic rhythms, and dancers moved with skill and grace. Women served steaming pots of jollof rice, pounded yam, and egusi soup, while men poured palm wine freely. Ekundayo stood tall among the crowd, his heart swelling with pride. Beside him, Ifeoluwa was breathtaking in her aso oak, her gele tied perfectly. She smiled politely at the guests, but Ekundayo noticed her hands trembled slightly. "You're nervous," he said softly. She nodded, her eyes darting toward the forest. "Something feels wrong." Ekundayo squeezed her hand. "You're safe. I'll protect you." As the feast continued, Baba Sola, the village elder, stood to give a blessing. He spoke of unity, love, and courage, but his words were interrupted by a strange sound, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the forest. The drumming stopped abruptly, and the crowd fell silent. "What was that?" someone whispered. Before anyone could answer, the wind picked up, swirling dust and leaves into the air. The golden feather Ekundayo had retrieved began to glow faintly, resting on a ceremonial table near Baba Ireti. The villagers stared at it in awe and fear. Suddenly, the feather emitted a bright flash of light. Ifeoluwa gasped and clutched her chest, stumbling backward. Ekundayo caught her, his heart racing. "What's happening?" he asked, panic in his voice. Baba Ireti stepped forward, his face pale. "It is beginning," he muttered. "What is beginning?" Ekundayo demanded. Before anyone could answer, a loud screech pierced the air. The Olododo bird, the same creature Ekundayo had faced in Ifeoluwa, appeared above the village, its golden feathers shimmering in the moonlight. The villagers screamed and scattered, their joyous celebration turning into chaos. The bird circled the village, its glowing eyes fixed on Ifeoluwa. Baba Sola shouted, "It seeks her. Protect the bride." Ekundayo drew his bow, aiming at the creature, but Ifeoluwa grabbed his arm. "No, you don't understand." "What don't I understand?" he asked, his voice desperate. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "The bird is not here to harm me. It is here. Because of me." The crowd froze, stunned by her words. Ekundayo stared at her, his mind racing. The Olododo bird let out another screech, its talons glowing with fiery light. The villagers looked to Baba Ireti for answers, but he simply lowered his head, unable to meet their eyes. In that moment, Ekundayo realized the truth. The woman he loved was hiding a secret far more dangerous than he could have imagined. As the Olododo bird circled above, Ifeoluwa fell to her knees, clutching her chest. Ekundayo knelt beside her, confusion and fear etched on his face. The villagers stood frozen, their eyes darting between the glowing feather, the screeching bird, and the trembling bride. "Ifeoluwa, what is happening?" Ekundayo asked, his voice trembling. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at him. "I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't. You would have left me." "Tell me now," he demanded, his grip on her shoulders tightening. She took a deep breath, her voice shaking as she spoke. "I am not what you think I am. My father and I, we are cursed. The Olododo bird guards me because I am bound to it. My true form." Before she could finish, a flash of golden light erupted from the feather, and the Olododo bird swooped down, landing in the center of the village square. Its eyes glowed brighter than ever, and its massive wings folded as it stared at Ifeoluwa. The villagers gasped, some fleeing to the safety of their huts. Baba Irati stepped forward, his voice loud and commanding. "Enough. It is time they know the truth." The crowd turned to him, their fear giving way to curiosity. Baba Irati sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping. "Ifeoluwa is no ordinary woman. She was born under the curse of the dragon. Her true form is hidden, but the Olododo bird is her guardian, sent to protect her and ensure the curse is never revealed." Gasps erupted from the villagers. "A dragon," someone whispered. "Is this why strange things have been happening?" Ekundayo's heart pounded in his chest. He looked at Ifeoluwa, who avoided his gaze. "Is this true?" he asked softly. She nodded, her hands trembling. "On our wedding night, the curse would have revealed itself. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid." The Olododo bird let out a low growl, as if confirming her words. The villagers began to murmur, fear and anger bubbling to the surface. "She's a danger to us," one man shouted. "We must drive her out." Another added. Ekundayo stood, facing the crowd. "No, she has done nothing to harm anyone." "She deceived us," Baba Sola bellowed. "We welcomed her into our village, and she brought this curse upon us." Ifeoluwa stood slowly, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I will leave if that is what you wish," she said, her voice breaking. "But I never meant to bring harm." Ekundayo grabbed her hand. "You're not going anywhere. I promise to protect you, and I will." The Olodo bird tilted its head, as if studying Ekundayo. It let out a piercing cry and spread its wings, glowing brighter with every beat. The villagers shielded their eyes as a wave of light engulfed the square. When the light faded, Ifeoluwa gasped. Her skin shimmered with faint scales, and her eyes glowed faintly. The dragon within her was waking. The village square was silent, the air heavy with tension. Ifeoluwa's shimmering skin and glowing eyes were undeniable proof of the curse she had carried. The Olododo bird remained perched nearby, its presence commanding and watchful. The villagers stood frozen, torn between fear and fascination. Some clutched their children tightly, while others whispered prayers. Baba Sola stepped forward, his face pale. "This cannot be allowed. She is cursed, a danger to us all." Ifeoluwa lowered her head, her voice trembling. "I never wanted this. I have tried to live a normal life, but the curse is part of me." Ekundayo stepped between her and the crowd, his hand gripping his bow. "She is still the woman I love. Whatever curse she carries, I will face it with her." Baba Irati raised a hand, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. "The curse can only be broken by one who loves her unconditionally," he said. "If Ekundayo's heart is true, he can set her free." The villagers exchanged uncertain glances. "And if he fails?" someone asked. "Then the dragon will awaken fully, and there will be no turning back," Baba Irati replied grimly. The Olododo bird let out a sharp cry, and a glowing circle of light appeared on the ground around Ifeoluwa and Ekundayo. The villagers gasped as the bird's eyes locked onto Ekundayo, its gaze penetrating and unyielding. "Step into the circle," Baba Irati instructed. "Face her true form and prove your love." Ekundayo hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the circle. The light grew brighter, and Ifeoluwa's form began to change. Her shimmering scales spread across her body, her limbs lengthened, and her eyes glowed like embers. Wings unfolded from her back, and her voice became a low, guttural growl. The villagers screamed and backed away, but Ekundayo held his ground. His heart pounded, but he refused to turn away. "Ifeoluwa," he said softly, stepping closer. "You are still the woman I love. Curse or no curse, you are mine." The Olododo bird screeched, its cry echoing through the square. The light around the circle intensified, and the ground trembled. Ifeoluwa's dragon form towered over Ekundayo, her fiery eyes locked onto his. For a moment, it seemed as though she might attack. But Ekundayo knelt, bowing his head. "I love you," he said, his voice steady, "no matter what form you take." The glow around them pulsed once, twice, and then burst outward, filling the village with warmth. When the light faded, Ifeoluwa stood before Ekundayo, fully human. The dragon within her was gone. The villagers stared in awe. Baba Irati smiled faintly. "The curse is broken." With the curse lifted, the tension in the village began to ease. Ifeoluwa and Ekundayo stood together, their hands intertwined. The Olododo bird, its duty fulfilled, let out a final cry and disappeared into the sky, its golden glow fading with the dawn. The villagers approached cautiously, their fear giving way to curiosity. Baba Sola stepped forward, his voice hesitant. I spoke out of fear. Forgive me, Ifeoluwa." She nodded, her voice calm but firm. "I understand your fear, but I hope you will see that I mean no harm." One by one, the villagers offered their apologies and blessings. The fear that had gripped Oke-Ara began to fade, replaced by admiration for Ekundayo's bravery and Ifeoluwa's resilience. Life in the village returned to normal, but Ifeoluwa and Ekundayo became symbols of courage and love. Together, they rebuilt trust with the villagers, proving that even the most daunting challenges could be overcome. Months passed, and the story of Ifeoluwa and Ekundayo spread beyond Oke-Ara, becoming a tale of hope and transformation. They lived peacefully, their love unshaken, and their bond stronger than ever. Their union became a reminder to all that love, courage, and trust could conquer even the deepest fears. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey through the heart of Yoruba culture and the tale of Ekundayo and Ifeoluwa. If you enjoyed this captivating story of love, courage, and transformation, don't forget to like this video to show your support. Subscribe to our channel for more enchanting tales rooted in African folklore and beyond. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if faced with such a mysterious curse?